Welcome back, my fellow dabbers and dabberettes. We are here with a small update from D-Nail with one of my favorite devices that's been released in the past year, and that's the Universal Torchless Heating System. And for those of you that are tuning in for the first time, basically, it's a way to replace your torch for heating bangers. And the way it works is the PID gets this unit hot, which is essentially like a little oven, and then you take your banger here, like mine from Black Market Glass. You'd put the banger on your rig, and then you take the whole rig and set it so the banger just rests inside of the hole. And it gets hot, and then take it out, do your little temp, and take your dab. It's an amazing experience that gets you a full 360 even heat on your banger, and it's nothing like you can ever accomplish with a torch. What's the update that happened? Well, let's just start from the top down and see what they changed on the outside before we start talking about the changes they made in performance. From the top down, looks like nothing has changed on this top part. We still have the same size hole. I did notice that the jack the unit sits on did shrink down a bit, so that's nice for saving some desk space. They changed the exterior shielding to be completely solid versus having these holes. And what I've noticed that this does is actually really cuts down on the radiant heat that this gives off when it's sitting on. And that's a big plus, especially for someone that lives in a small living quarters like myself. When we get these both powered on, we'll shoot them with the heat gun to see really how many degrees we're saving. It looks like they changed the top tray a little bit and added this hot surface warning on it, which is kind of nice. The bottom tray looks like it changed its footprint to be just a little bit wider, which is really nice for when you have this all the way jacked up, it won't be as wobbly. We see they added another hot surface thing, and they did a major update to how the cord comes out of the back of the unit. On this one, the cord just came out from underneath, and it would always get tangled up on this little crank here. Or if you were cranking up the jack stand, sometimes it would get caught in the jacks over here. D-Nail went ahead and changed this and upgraded the cord to have this exterior solid piece that shoots the cord off the corner so it no longer interferes with the jack on the back. That's pretty much it for the physical upgrades. I did notice also that when they are cranked all the way down, that the older unit is about half a finger shorter than the newer unit. Let's go ahead and jack them all the way up to see if they're the same height. So from the looks of it, not only does this one sit a little taller in its fully cranked down position, it cranks up to be about 2 fingers taller than the original version, which can be nice for some of us that have bigger rigs. And the last thing I'll bring up as far as differences is on the bottom. For my first version, I had a special edition, number 19 out of 150, and on the newer versions, we've switched to just a simple serial number. Before we move along to turning these on, I do want to mention that the quartz top does fit both units. So if you had a quartz top and you send yours in for rebuild, or you decide to buy the new version, the quartz top will still fit. Let's go ahead and power these on to see what kind of improvements we've made on the inside. Since I don't have two D-Nail PIDs, I'm going to run the new one on the D-Nail PID, and I'm going to run the older version on my Cannabis Hardware PID. But essentially, on the inside, these two PIDs are the same thing. They have the same PID device module. These are going to be pretty similar in the way they act. And so we got the 1.1 hooked up to the D-Nail, and then we got the original first version hooked up to the Cannabis Hardware one. So now that I'm all situated, I'm going to go ahead and flip these on at the same time, and that way we can watch the heat up and see if one heats up faster. Looks like the new one had about 100 degrees jump start. Maybe it was a little warmer in my place. Oops. I did forget to set this one up. So let's just go ahead. We're going to change this to 900. Sorry, guys. Now that we're closing out on the temperature, let's talk about a couple things that we saw. Thing number one, when this got up to 900 degrees, which is my set temp, it actually shot all the way up to like 950, 960. And that's something very typical that PIDs do to try and equalize the temperature, and is all about the settings within the PID. And this is also something that I'm working on as a side project, is a really fancy Arduino run PID to help eliminate issues like this. But overall, not really an issue. Because if you watch the cannabis hardware one, this one isn't overshooting as much or nearly as quickly. So this has a slower ramp up, so it's very hard to really evenly compare heat up times. But I will say that when I run the V1 on my D-Nail, it is a slightly slower heat up time. We're not talking 5 or 10 minutes, we're talking a couple minutes, but still, minutes matter. So now that we've got both of these up to 900 degrees, we're going to set the PIDs aside because they don't really change temperature like my ball vapes do when you hit them. And one of the big noticeable improvements is just how much heat the unit gives off or doesn't give off from the sides. The V1 is significantly hotter all the way around. With the V1.1, we still have a hot spot up top, but that makes sense. It's where the sides are that really matters. The heat put off from the sides is way, way, way less. But don't take my word for it. Let's go ahead and get the FLIR heat gun out and really put this to the test. When you're using a heat gun like this to test objects, you really need to take into consider something called the emissivity setting. Emissivity? I don't know. It's whatever this little E is. And when you change that E, it's basically how see-through is the object. Since we're testing metal instead of quartz today, I really need to make sure I change the setting to read the metal correctly. And let's start with the V1. It looks like on the outside, we're anywhere between 6 to 300 degrees as we get towards the bottom. And this has only been on for a minute, so these numbers are only going to go up. Then let's go ahead and look at the V1.1. And with the V1.1, even at the top of the unit, we're getting about half of the temperature. And then as we get down, it's not as big of a spread, but it definitely looks like they made a huge improvement of almost 300 degrees on the outside, which is huge. Let's check out the V1 again, just to see how crazy that difference is. That's almost 600 degrees on the outside. So we've made a huge improvement there. And then let's go ahead and look on the inside. So on the inside, you're getting temperatures in the 700 range. And then over here, same thing, temperatures in the 700 range. So what this tells me is that when I run the D-Nail at about 900, my dab temp is going to come out at about 700. You're looking at about a 200 difference from where you set the PID to where you pull out the banger. And this is a little bit about the give and take with the D-Nail. If you run it lower to get closer to your dab temp, so maybe you don't have to use something like a dab right, it takes significantly longer to heat up the banger. If you run it higher, you use the element inside the heater faster, which could lead to needing a rebuild, and when you pull out, it will also be hotter. And for someone like me that loves to leave the banger inside the heater and just wait until I'm ready to take a dab, or I take a dab and just get my next one ready immediately and put it in the heater, running it super high can be detrimental to my quartz. So if you're at a party or you have a bunch of friends over, sure, crank the PID up to 1000 and just make sure that you're really paying attention with a timer on when to pull the quartz out, which should only be about a minute or two. At 900 degrees, it takes about 3 minutes for my banger to heat up because inside the hole is only 700 degrees. But when I pull my banger out, it's really ready for my temp down and to take that dab. Speaking of taking dabs, before we get too far into testing this new device, I want to give you a sneak peek preview to next week's video where we talk about another new device from D-Nail, which kind of branches out of their wheelhouse just a little bit and strays away from dabs and goes into the world of dry herb vaping with their device called the Lotus, which is a quartz exterior filled with whatever media you want that fits inside the Universal Torchless System to vape dry herb. And if you guys know my channel and you know me, you know we like to vape dry herb here. Stay tuned for this awesome new Flavor Town device, the Lotus. Let's get back into it and take a dab with this new version of the torchless heating system. Let's go ahead and put this to the test. Personally, I use this little tea timer that I got on Amazon. It has a 3, 4, and 5 minute timer. I just go ahead and flip this when I put my banger in the hole, and I wait for that to hit the 3-minute mark. Today I'm using my Slurpzilla from Black Market Glass, an absolutely spectacular banger. High heat retention, great flavor, and amazing function. I'm gonna go ahead and get my dab right out so I can temp it once it comes out. And for today's concentrate, I am using some Vertical Boys Vertsiaga. This is probably one of the top cold cure flavors and brands that I've tried in the past year. These guys absolutely kill it. If you have a chance to try Vertical Boys, I suggest doing it. All right, so we're just before the 3-minute mark. Let's go ahead and see how hot this is. Okay, so we're at about 400 degrees. Let's go ahead and toss it in. I'm gonna have to go just a little bit past the 3-minute mark because I pulled it out. But again, it's gonna be about 3 minutes depending on what setup you have. And this is a really thick, heavy banger. It has 5mm walls. So this thing takes a little bit of extra time to heat. But really, if I had a torch, this banger would be an absolute butane killer. So I'm really happy to have this nail with this heating device. And last thing before I take this dab, I showed you the quartz top a little bit. I've got a lot of questions whether this is worth it or really makes a huge difference. I haven't noticed it make that big of a difference on normal size bangers that fit in the hole like this. However, I do have a Black Market Glass blender that has the arm way near the top. What ends up happening is like this much of the blender is sticking out of the top of the hole because this is a little too long and really should probably use the XL. That's where the glass cap comes into play. This helps this a lot. Doesn't help that so much, but really helps this. So now that we've hit the 3-minute mark, let's go ahead and give this another test and see where our temp is at. All right. So my dab right kind of went off because I moved the arm a bit, but you can see that we are right around 550. At the 3-minute mark, so I'm going to let it drop down just a smidge more, and we're going to do this nice Vertsiaga dab at about 510, 520. Cheers. What a great dab. That was absolutely flavorful, and you can see no dark spots or chazzing or anything like that on my nice banger. So I'm gonna let this cool down to my dunk temp, and that about wraps it up for the V1.1. If you already have a D-nail, I do suggest getting rebuilt. If for just one feature, it would be for the amount of heat that this puts off. Since we're cutting that in half, that makes a big difference for your room or office. And if you don't already have one of these devices, I highly suggest getting one if you're into dabbing. If dabbing is your main source of consumption and or you just really like dabbing, this is one of the best upgrades you can do for your arsenal. The D-nail, Universal Torchless Heating System. Moo approved. And as always, stay lifted. Psst, come hang out with us on Discord.